tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to MOTAT. I am your MC for tonight, Lorraine Tipne. We are excited to be hosting our 2023 series of Ngā Korero, Rererangi, Aviation Conversations within our beautiful Aviation Hall. Very shortly, I will welcome guest speaker Michelle Noordermeer and her talk on reducing carbon emissions. Working in the aviation industry for over 20 years, Michelle initially started out as a flying instructor and moved on to analytical, strategic, and business development roles. After realizing the impact aviation has on the environment, Michelle became passionate about fighting climate change while continuing to love the aviation sector. She was awarded Auckland Airport's Standout Environmental Champion in 2019 before joining the founding team in establishing Carbon Click to make a meaningful difference to the industry, people, and the planet. Carbon Click is a B Corp certified envirotech business which empowers over 1,000 aviation and e-commerce companies around the world with simple, meaningful, and transparent carbon offsetting solutions. Thank you for joining us tonight. Put your hands together as we welcome Michelle Noordermeer to the stage.
Thanks very much, Lauren, and kia ora koutou. So as mentioned, I've spent 20 years in the aviation industry, obviously starting at the age of 9. I have a commercial pilot's licence and I've worked as a flying instructor before completing a degree in aviation management and working in mostly commercial roles focused on growth, which is basically the opposite of sustainability. Aviation is an industry that I absolutely love, and it's clear that it has many positive impacts on the world. However, about 5 years ago, I started to realise the impact flying has on the environment, which led me on a completely different path with Carbon Click. So today I'm going to share what I've learned about aviation's impact on the environment, the challenges and opportunities around decarbonising the industry, and what we're doing at Carbon Click to help. When it comes to climate change, the aviation industry often gets a lot of negative attention. So let's have a look at the facts and gain a clearer understanding of where the aviation industry truly stands in this conversation. When we look at the global emissions pie chart, the entire transport sector, which includes planes and cars, trucks, trains, is responsible for 22% of the world's CO2 emissions. Within this substantial chunk, aviation's contribution stands at 11%, which is around 2 to 3% of global emissions. When you think about the importance of connecting continents, fostering global business, and enabling cultural exchanges, aviation's contribution seems relatively small. Something that often gets overlooked is the advances the aviation industry has made in reducing emissions on a per passenger kilometre basis. The aircraft that you may have boarded in 1990 were considerably less fuel efficient than they are today. The aviation industry has made significant investments in research and development by adopting more aerodynamic designs and lightweight materials and by harnessing the power of more fuel-efficient engines. In 3 short decades, there's been a staggering 50% reduction in the emissions per passenger kilometre. When you think about the tens of thousands of flights taking off daily, you can begin to imagine the cumulative impact of this improvement. We all know in reality that the primary motivation from the industry was, of course, their own cost savings, but no one can deny that this was also a really good thing environmentally. However, while the technological advancements and efficiency improvements have been really impressive, the growth of the industry has outstripped these benefits. Over the recent decades, passenger numbers have ballooned, doubling since 1987. This explosive growth means that while each aircraft may emit less CO2 per passenger than its predecessor, the sheer volume of planes in the sky has significantly increased the total amount of CO2 emissions. In tangible terms, this growth translates to aviation now being accountable for 1 billion metric tonnes of CO2 annually. There are numerous factors fueling this boom in air travel, from the globalisation of businesses and economies, an expanding middle class in emerging markets who also have a thirst for travel, to the intrinsic human desire to explore new destinations and cultures. It's often challenging to conceptualise the scale of an industry, especially one as vast and interconnected as aviation. But imagine for a moment that all the planes in the world belong to a single hypothetical country. Let's call it Aeroland. The reality is startling. Aeroland would actually rank in the top 10 carbon emitters globally. To give this some context, it would stand shoulder to shoulder with countries like Japan, with sprawling factories and vast transportation networks. What makes this comparison even more astounding is the relative youth of Aeroland. Unlike nations that underwent industrial revolutions centuries ago, Aeroland has only existed for around 120 years. And we're anticipating a surge in emissions. By 2050, the volume of aviation emissions is forecast to double from where we are today. This projection is at odds with many other industries that are witnessing a downward trend in their carbon footprints due to widespread sustainability initiatives and advancements in green technologies. A significant driver behind this growth is the economic rise of developing nations. As these countries progress, the average income of their citizens increases, unlocking aspirations and desires to travel that were previously out of reach. For many in these regions, flying isn't just about mobility, it's a symbol of economic advancement and an opportunity to connect with the wider world. As more individuals in developing countries achieve middle-class status, the demand for air travel will skyrocket. Nevertheless, it's essential to recognise that the world is increasingly becoming environmentally conscious. There's a growing cohort of consumers voicing concerns over the environmental implications of their choices, including air travel. Governments worldwide are also imposing stricter regulations and launching initiatives to curtail the growth of emissions in various sectors. Alternative modes of transportation, such as high-speed rail networks, are gaining traction in several regions, offering faster, more efficient, and more eco-friendly travel options. Such innovations and shift might intuitively seem like they put a dent in aviation's growth. However, current research suggests that these factors combined might only slow the industry's growth marginally. The allure of aviation, with its unmatched speed, global reach, and the unique cultural and economic opportunities it offers, seems too strong to be significantly overshadowed by environmental concerns or alternative transport modes in the foreseeable future. While much of the global discussions on climate change revolves around CO2 emissions, the aviation industry also contributes to global warming through non-CO2 emissions, such as contrails, ozone, soot, and water vapour. Each of these has distinct properties and overall a significant, although shorter-lived, impact on climate change. Unlike CO2, which has a fairly consistent impact regardless of when or where it's emitted, the environmental impacts of non-CO2 emissions depend on many different factors, such as flight path, altitude, time of day, and even the season. This variability makes it immensely challenging to calculate the impact of an individual flight, especially when considering all the different conditions flights operate under globally. However, current research shows that non-CO2 emissions increase the impact by a factor of 1.9. This is significant as it implies that the climate impact of aviation could be nearly twice as much as it currently is estimated. Once substantiated by further research, this will increase the urgency of the aviation industry to address its emissions. Now, what's also important to understand is that while emissions from other industries, such as agriculture or manufacturing, are distributed all around the world, the emissions from aviation are distinctly concentrated on the affluent. Around 1% of the world's population shoulders a whopping 50% of aviation emissions. This small group exerts a considerable environmental impact that affects the global climate. And it's often those in developing countries who contribute the least to aviation emissions who are facing the greatest impacts of climate change. This is one of the factors that makes aviation a target for climate activists. You're in this 1% club if you generate 11.5 tonnes of CO2 or more per year. For example, if you travelled from Auckland to London return in economy class, as I did last week, you're already up to 4.5 tonnes. If you go to my.carbon.click/calculator, you can quickly add up your emissions there. Now, if you've travelled in business class, you're definitely in the 1%. There's a little animation here which shows the difference in per-person emissions by class of travel. As you can see, anyone travelling in a private jet has a really significant impact, hence why people travelling to environmental conferences in a private jet get picked on by activists. As of a 2019 study, New Zealand is ranked 8th globally for aviation emissions on a per capita basis. This might come as a surprise, as we never talk about this, but there are several reasons for it. Firstly, our relative wealth increases accessibility to air travel. All developed countries with higher disposable incomes typically see a larger percentage of their population flying, whether it's for business, leisure, or domestic reasons. Domestically, of course, we have the Cook Strait in between the North and South Islands, and not much in the way of public transport, so we fly. And of course, our remote location means longer international flights, which translate to more fuel consumption and therefore greater emissions. International aviation, which accounts for approximately 2/3 of global aviation emissions, was exempted from the Paris Agreement, along with shipping, largely because who takes responsibility for these emissions is contentious. The rationale behind this decision is rooted in the complexities of attributing emissions. For instance, if Air New Zealand takes off from Auckland, stops in Los Angeles and lands in London, how should responsibility for the emissions generated be assigned? Does the responsibility lie with New Zealand, where the airline is based, the US, where it refueled, or the UK, where passengers disembarked, or perhaps a combination? Without a clear framework for responsibility, it's challenging to monitor, regulate, and reduce these emissions effectively. I'll come back to how international aviation emissions are dealt with in a minute. But for us in New Zealand, this exemption paints a skewed picture of our carbon footprint. Our domestic focus might lead us to believe that aviation contributes to merely 1.5%. But if we were to factor in our international flights, our country's emissions would soar, more than tripling in size. Just something to be aware of. International aviation emissions fall under the mandate of the International Civil Aviation Organisation, who established CORSIA, which is the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. This scheme aims to achieve carbon neutral growth from a base of 85% of 2019 levels, and that's largely through the purchase of carbon offsets. Wealthier countries pushed for steeper reductions in international aviations, but a compromise was reached with developing countries. Unfortunately, since reductions are not counted in individual nations' emissions accounts, there's little motivation for individual countries to go above and beyond. Yet hope is on the horizon. The aviation sector recently made a unified commitment to a net zero target by 2050. There is a comprehensive plan which touches upon 4 pillars: sustainable aviation fuels, new technologies, infrastructure and operations, and offsetting. We'll now delve deeper into each of these areas, examining both the barriers that stand in the way and the potential solutions that can guide the aviation sector to a more sustainable future. Sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF as it's known, seems like the dream solution. It's crafted from sustainable feedstocks and waste products and can potentially slash our emissions by 80%. It's known as a drop-in solution. That is, it's been designed to fit right into our current aircraft and infrastructure. That minimises entry barriers, making it easier for widespread adoption. Additionally, SAF maintains a high energy density compared to alternatives like electric or hydrogen, making it suitable for long-haul flights where energy density is crucial. However, as always, there are challenges. Today, SAF adoption faces considerable hurdles in terms of cost. We're talking about a price tag that's 2 to 7 times higher than our current jet fuels. And in a competitive industry with razor-thin profit margins, this does become a significant barrier. Couple that with a limited supply, as SAF currently accounts for a mere 0.1% of the global jet fuel supply, and you can see the scale of the challenge. The sustainability of feedstocks can be contentious. For example, utilising food crops can lead to competition with food supply and potential land use change. Public scepticism also stems from concerns related to deforestation and biodiversity loss. If developers can make money by growing feedstocks for SAF, some will burn down native forests to do so. These concerns may impact the adoption and acceptance of SAF. Yet, in the face of these challenges, the demand for SAF is on the rise, and it's anticipated by 2050, SAF could achieve 65% of the emission reduction required to meet the net zero targets. Realising this vision, of course, will require significant policy, technological, and supply chain support. Interestingly, SAF has also been shown to reduce non-CO2 impacts, and research shows that the potential climate benefits could be 9 to 15 times higher if targeted onto specific flights where contrails are known to form. While SAF isn't a magical quick fix, it does hold substantial promise. With the right focus, investment, and collaboration, it could be a game changer for the industry. Diverse technological innovations, including new propulsion technologies, are underway. Aeroplanes travel at high altitudes and great distances, so they need fuels that pack a lot of energy into a small volume and weight. We're expecting to welcome commercial electric and hybrid electric into service in the late 2020s. Initially, these will be catering to smaller regional routes. It's not as simple for larger aircraft, though. To equip a large aircraft with a battery that matches the energy of fuel, that battery would weigh a staggering 47 times more. In simple terms, that's nearly 7 times the weight of a fully fueled aircraft. So unfortunately, for our large commercial flights, merely swapping fuel for batteries isn't on the horizon. A promising alternative innovation is hydrogen. Hydrogen, when burned, produces water vapour as its primary product, not CO2. This makes it an incredibly clean source of power, although importantly it needs to be green hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced using electricity generated from renewable sources, such as wind, solar and hydroelectric power. However, it's not as simple as just switching out one fuel for another. Aircraft designs will need a rethink. Hydrogen requires more storage space than conventional jet fuel, which means our future aeroplanes might look quite different to what we're used to. Additionally, airports will need updates to their infrastructure to safely store and refuel with hydrogen. Just like any fuel, hydrogen is flammable, but with the right protocols and technologies, these risks are manageable. After all, aviation is an industry that prioritises safety above all else. The lighter the plane, the less energy required to lift and keep it airborne. We're seeing innovations in material science with composites like carbon fibre reinforced polymers, which are both strong and light. These materials can replace heavier metals, leading to weight savings without compromising safety. There are also new aircraft designs which have aerodynamic advantages, making them more fuel efficient. These could pave the way for a more sustainable aviation future. The blended wing body design merges the aeroplane's wings with its main body, resulting in a shape that looks like a flying wing. Distributed propulsion designs spread across many small engines or electric fans out along the wings instead of having just a few large engines. A V-shaped aircraft is a concept being explored by some researchers, which, as the name suggests, involves a V-shaped aircraft where passengers sit inside the wings. Airships or modern blimps, while slower than conventional aircraft, are being explored for certain transport needs, especially cargo. Modern airships are filled with helium, not hydrogen, so they're safe. They're obviously not more aerodynamically efficient, but they are more fuel efficient. As for when we can see these innovations taking flight, realistically, these innovations are not expected to be ready until well into the mid-2030s. And would then require testing to meet safety and regulatory standards. And even if every airline was ready to purchase a new fleet in 2040, it would still take time to manufacture. So wide-scale commercialisation of new technologies isn't expected until well after 2050. Overall, new technologies are expected to make up 13% of the solution by 2050. The more efficiently we can operate every flight, the less fuel we burn and the fewer emissions we release. Simple adjustments like optimising flight paths, reducing circling over congested airports, and ensuring a smooth flow of traffic can lead to substantial fuel savings. A concept called continuous descent approach, or CDA, is a prime example. It allows aircraft to descend continuously, utilising minimal engine power rather than the traditional step-down approaches. This method alone can reduce fuel consumption and emissions significantly during the landing phase. Air traffic control systems need upgrades too. Modern systems can better manage aircraft flow, minimising unnecessary fuel burn from planes waiting for landing slots or circling overhead. By embracing these technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, these systems can predict and adapt to traffic patterns, weather changes, and other variables in real time. At the airport, ground operations can also be made greener. Rather than keeping engines running when planes are on the tarmac, ground power units can be employed, or even better, renewable powered units. Electric towing vehicles can help position aircraft without needing them to power up their main engines prematurely. The airports of the future can incorporate renewable energy sources like solar and wind into the airport power grids. Many airports have vast open spaces, ideal for solar panel installation. Not only can this provide power for airport operations, but in some cases, excess power can be fed back into the local grid. Improvements to infrastructure and operations are expected to make a small but important difference at 3% of the solution by 2050. Carbon capture technologies essentially grab CO2 emissions directly from the atmosphere, or in some cases, right from the emission source, preventing them from contributing to global warming. This captured CO2 can then be stored underground or utilised in various ways. It's currently a long way from being fully scaled up and is prohibitively expensive at around $1,000 a tonne, but expect to see it scale up in the 2040s and become 11% of the solution by 2050. Carbon offsetting is a way to compensate for greenhouse gas emissions by reducing or removing emissions elsewhere. For instance, if an airline is responsible for emitting 1,000 tonnes of CO2, it can offset this by supporting projects such as reforestation or renewable energy. Although there are many excellent projects, the voluntary carbon market is rife with low-quality carbon projects. In certain cases, these projects may not truly deliver the environmental benefits they pledge, and worse, some may even pose threats to biodiversity and human rights. Without a rigorous regulatory framework, there's a risk that these subpar projects could impact genuine efforts to counterbalance emissions. Enhancing transparency, accountability, and standards is essential to ensure that offsets purchased genuinely contribute to environmental conservation. Greenwashing also has the potential to undermine offsetting. Greenwashing is a marketing ploy where a company makes itself appear more environmentally friendly than it really is. Some companies use cheap carbon offsets to claim carbon neutrality rather than taking the critical first step of reducing emissions. However, done well with quality offsets, carbon offsetting combats unavoidable emissions right now, not in the decades it will take to develop or deploy technology at scale. Offsetting is also a powerful way to build the clean energy infrastructure to avoid further emissions. As you can see from this chart, the estimated reliance on carbon offsetting to reduce emissions will be substantial for decades to come. The aviation industry's commitment to achieving a net zero target by 2050 has been met with both applause and scepticism. This ambitious goal, while commendable, has been critiqued for a variety of reasons. One of the most significant is that this commitment is non-binding. This essentially means that there aren't any strict regulatory consequences for companies that do not adhere to the target, potentially rendering the promise as more of a symbolic gesture than an actionable objective. Another sticking point is that the plan emphasises CO2 emissions, leaving out other greenhouse gases. Given that aviation also produces non-CO2 emissions that impact the environment, as touched on earlier, this oversight can undermine the plan's overall efficacy. The majority of carbon-reducing innovations in aviation are future-focused. Advanced sustainable aviation fuels, hydrogen-powered planes, and carbon capture are promising, but are yet to be realised at scale. While long-term solutions are vital, the urgency of our current climate crisis mandates immediate and tangible actions. As the climate emergency accelerates, the need for collaborative action has never been more critical. Every individual, every business, and every government must contribute to its solutions. It's in this spirit of collaboration that I introduced Carbon Click. So we're a New Zealand business based in Auckland, but we also have a global team across the USA, Europe, and Southeast Asia. About 5 years ago, 2 of our founders were working on the carbon offsetting program of a major international airline. They saw the opportunity to break away and create an enterprise-grade platform that can then be used by an unlimited number of airlines in a way that's simple, meaningful, and cost-effective, but importantly adds a layer of transparency. Reducing emissions is obviously key, but in many industries like aviation, it's not possible to reduce all emissions. And that's where we step in as a platform for businesses to manage their carbon offsetting activities. We've taken a really complex system and made it simple for businesses to integrate APIs and simple for end users to quickly calculate their impact, offset their emissions, and see the difference they've made. We've developed a methodology to ensure that we offer only the highest quality offsetting projects, and we enable businesses to create a portfolio of projects that resonate with their end users. We've designed our whole platform around transparency. We purchase our projects in advance, allowing us to carve off micro amounts of carbon credits so end users can instantly see where their contribution has gone and the impact that the project is making. For example, in the aviation sector, we've integrated with a global distribution system. That's a computerized network system that enables airline transactions. And this provides the functionality for all of their 46 airlines to quickly and seamlessly integrate carbon offsetting. During the first quarter of next year, we'll also be live with Amadeus, which is the world's largest global distribution system, meaning that we can also offer carbon offsetting to a further 435 airlines. So when a passenger makes a booking, as per this example from Air Chatham's, the passenger can see the emissions generated from their portion of the flight. And they have the option to offset by just simply ticking a box. We typically get around 7 to 8% of people offsetting, although there's different variation in different regions of the world. The passenger makes a simple payment to the airline rather than having to move off to another landing page and without having to get their credit card details out again. We source a wide range of projects from forest renewal to clean energy generation, and we make sure that they're all of the highest quality. For starters, every single project in our portfolio is certified by a registered, recognised registry such as Gold Standard or Verra. From there, we evaluate each project against 7 key criteria. We back projects that are additional. This is that they would not have happened without carbon finance. There have been cases where certain hydroelectric projects in China were already underway or even completed by the time they received funding, indicating that they would have proceeded even without carbon finance. There have also been instances of project developers adjusting baseline emissions in order to generate carbon credits for the project. We make sure that the project's baseline emissions are accurately measured. Forestry projects can be problematic in ensuring permanence. Fires, pest diseases, or logging can release sequestered carbon back into the atmosphere. Our projects must store or remove carbon for a long period of time or be backed by alternative measures. We check that selling the carbon credits issued by the project doesn't create a perverse incentive to worsen the climate crisis. Believe it or not, but there's been cases in Russia and the Ukraine where the creation of the hydrofluorocarbon, or HFC 23 offset market inadvertently created an incentive for companies to produce more of the greenhouse gas HFC 22 so that they could then be paid to destroy its byproduct HFC 23. There have been concerns about countries selling carbon credits for emissions reductions that also count towards their national targets under international agreements, leading to a situation where the same reduction is counted twice. All carbon credits from our projects are issued once and only once. All our projects must have additional co-benefits to improve social, economic, and environmental outcomes in the local area. We ensure that they align with at least 3 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And then, of course, every project must have robust monitoring and verification policies to ensure it continues to meet our requirements. By doing this, we ensure that our offset projects really are of the highest quality, making a meaningful difference and not attracting any risk of scrutiny, which could damage an airline's reputation. In the case of Air Chathams, they have selected 3 different projects. A native forestry regeneration project in Korero. So this is a 69-hectare area that's been retired from grazing and is being reverted to a native forest. They also have an energy-efficient cookstove project in Uganda, which distributes improved cookstoves to around 25,000 families. And these cookstoves burn considerably less firewood. And finally, they have a solar water heater project in India. So this project delivers solar water heaters to Indian communities and businesses, helping to avoid the burning of coal and providing cheap renewable energy for poor families. We often get asked about the price of projects. All projects are priced based on the cost of a tonne of CO2 offset, and there's a lot of variation in the price. We currently have about 20 different projects on our books, and they vary in price from around $15 a tonne to $120 a tonne. We don't currently have any SAF products, but if we did, they cost over $600 a tonne. Everyone wants local projects, but we are, of course, all on the same planet, and a tonne of CO2 offset in New Zealand versus a tonne of CO2 offset in, say, Nigeria has exactly the same impact. Offsetting through clean energy projects in developing countries is actually a really positive way forward for both people and the environment. Transparency is key when it comes to carbon offsetting. Businesses and individuals need to have full confidence that their contributions really are making a difference. This is where we're truly different from our competitors. Our offsetting platform has been built around transparency. We pre-purchase our offset projects, so as well as receiving a receipt, people can track their impact. They can see the transaction history and proof of our retirement certificate. They can also see full details of the project, including links to the project registry and the collective impact of the project. This level of transparency proves that the reduction is genuine, and it ensures that every carbon reduction is counted once and only once. This process creates trust, meaning that more people have the confidence to offset, which of course leads to the right thing for the environment. And we just have a little video here of our aviation solution, which is marketed to airlines.
Everyone loves to fly, but flying has an impact on the environment. In response, airlines are taking action to reduce emissions by embracing more efficient operations, trialling sustainable aviation fuels, and developing new propulsion technologies. Unfortunately, these initiatives are still at an early stage, far from being deployed at scale. And we can't wait. We need to take climate action now. Fortunately, with high-quality carbon offsetting, we can help your airline give passengers the option to offset their emissions. The process is simple and transparent. When making a booking, passengers can add a carbon offset in the same way they can add insurance, as a line item on the booking. Payment is made to the airline, and passengers who offset receive an email confirmation allowing them to trace their contribution to meaningful, fully verified projects from around the world, supporting a mix of reforestation and clean energy initiatives such as solar energy and wind farms. And every project supports at least 3 UN Sustainable Development Goals, ensuring support for both people and our planet. We only have one shot at fighting climate change. Let's work together to make a difference. Underscore your commitment to sustainability with an easy-to-use integrated solution and with full transparency that enables trust, supporting meaningful and verified projects that are restoring balance to our planet. Contact us or visit our website to learn more. Carbon Click. Climate action made simple.
So we launched back in November 2019, which of course was the worst time to launch a solution for the aviation industry. So we pivoted off into e-commerce. We used the same concept, enabling e-commerce businesses to give their customers the option of offsetting their product and shipping emissions. We now have 4 key product pillars that apply across all industries. Emissions calculators to help businesses and individuals quantify their carbon footprint, identify areas for reduction, and know what to offset. Offsetting programs to help people to make a positive impact. And the feedback we've had from businesses is that this drives customer engagement and increases brand loyalty. And as I just talked about, we have the meaningful climate projects, and we also have the digital marketing tools such as a landing page and an impact dashboard to encourage other people to take action. Since 2019, we've gained nearly 1,200 businesses in 38 countries across the world. These businesses are spread across many different industries, including travel, e-commerce and events. We're now a B Corp company, which means that we have met the highest international standards of social and environmental performance, accountability and transparency. We know that we're not the ultimate solution, but we're making a difference now as we only get one shot to fight climate change. To date, we've helped to offset over 300 million kgs of CO2, and we're expecting to do that volume every month by the end of next year as we bring on new airlines. So just in summary, aviation does have a significant impact on the environment. It currently generates 1 billion tonnes of CO2 per year, and this is expected to double by 2050. And it will double again when non-CO2 emissions are included. There is a plan to get the aviation industry to net zero, but it's non-binding and it doesn't take non-CO2 emissions into account. SAF is currently very expensive and there are low volumes, but it's expected to make up 65% of the solution by 2050. New technologies are unlikely to make a significant difference pre-2050 due to the time it takes to design, develop and manufacture, which means carbon offsetting has a key role in supporting the industry to reach its targets. The aviation industry needs a huge amount of industry and government collaboration to decarbonise, and everyone needs to play their part. Carbon Click is helping by making the offset part simple, meaningful and transparent. Thanks very much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
So, what's actually the effect of contrails?
As contrails, basically they can start to form cirrus clouds, which creates kind of a blanket effect around the planet and keeps the heat in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Possibly a dumb question, but does nuclear power have any potential impact on the aviation industry?
Oh, that's a good question. To be honest, I don't know. I haven't heard of anything. Nothing I've read that's come up with that, but you never know.
Good luck with Air New Zealand, because for a long time I didn't offset my carbons because you think, well, I don't know where it's going and maybe into the back pocket, but I do now. But, you have no idea what it means, so I hope you get them on board.
Thank you.
So the thing about nuclear isn't a silly one. The Russians, I think, have got now a cruise missile which is nuclear powered. So nuclear power isn't as kind of crazy as it might sound on first look.
We've got to consider all these different options, right? So, yeah.
Just a question for someone who's working in a business who's trying to, I guess, be a bit more conscious. We're actually working to B Corp ourselves.
Awesome.
I guess trying to convince people internally around why travelling in economy class is more desirable than travelling business. And of course their argument to me was, well, the plane takes off with however many seats and it's kind of like a sunk, like a sunk cost. It's like a sunk emissions. So it doesn't really matter whether, that was their argument. I'm just curious to see how you would, combat that, because I found it very difficult to argue it.
Yeah, it's a good story to tell yourself, because who doesn't prefer to travel in business class compared to economy? But I think travel is one of those things people don't understand their carbon footprint. They really don't know. When I heard flying off to London is 4.5 tonnes, can you try to imagine what 4.5 tonnes of CO2 looks like? It starts to become real. And so I think, we've got calculators, I can, if you go to carbonclick.com, you'll be able to find the calculators we have. You can get your team to work out their carbon footprint and look at the impact of flying business class versus economy. So that starts to make it real for people. And then, often people start to become a little bit more passionate about the environment and the impact and make choices. One thing that's potentially coming up in the future, I've heard it from a politician, is that in government they're looking at carbon budgets. And so basically, you might get 5 or 10 tonnes of a budget per year, and you could fly to the UK in business class, or you might be able to take 10 trips to Australia. The choice becomes yours. And so I think as that starts to gain hold and more businesses and things do that, people become more aware and, make their choices of how they want to travel.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your business.
Thank you.
It's a tough job, and I love seeing New Zealand businesses take it to the world, so thank you. Can I ask, how do you think about the time gap between emissions produced today and the delivery through offsets?
Yeah, so that's probably something that people don't understand very well. And so when you're producing like a really good quality offset, it's actually already sequestered that carbon, and that's how they get the credit for it. So when you offset, say, a tonne of CO2 and you pay for that, that's actually already occurred, and those credits are with the project developer. So there are other projects that might be future-focused ones that some companies used. We don't use those ones typically because that's, it may or it may not happen. We like the ones that have already sequestered the carbon.
Are there any other questions this evening? Lovely. Well, thank you so much. I think that wraps up tonight's conversation, and thank you so much for being here this evening, everyone.